Hey guys, tonight we begin with the peculiar luxury and quiet horror of waking up as a wealthy somebody in a world where absolutely nothing runs without a servant doing it for you, badly, slowly, or with the deeply suppressed fury of someone who hasn't been paid in 6 months. You open your eyes not to an alarm clock, but to the sound of wood creaking in protest beneath a footman's boots as he shuffles into your cold, damp room, carrying your hot water basin with all the enthusiasm of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Your bed is large, carved, drafty, and lined with a mattress stuffed with goose feathers, straw, or, if it's a bad year, something suspiciously crunchy. The stone walls around you don't care that it's winter. They don't retain heat. They laugh at it. Your only defense is a moth chewed velvet blanket and the faint warmth radiating from your own slightly embarrassed body. Your breath fogs the air. You can't feel your toes. And the fire you asked to be lit an hour ago? Still just a pile of yesterday's ashes and a flint that's clearly given up. Your chamber pot is waiting beneath the bed. It's metal, uncomfortably cold, and your only option, unless you'd like to shuffle down a freezing hallway in your underthings to an outdoor latrine that hasn't been cleaned since someone declared war on France. No, thank you. So you do what nobles do best. You pretend dignity still exists as you carefully squat over a bowl and pray that Thomas, the footman, is making just enough noise to drown out the sound of your own humanity. This is your life, and yet it's better than 99% of the population. You're wealthy. You're important. You own 4 wigs, 2 dogs, and at least one cousin who's trying to poison you for inheritance. You have servants, which means, of course, you are completely helpless. You lift your arms, not in celebration, but in surrender, because you can't dress yourself. That's someone else's job. Your valet enters, eyes half lidded with boredom, and begins the daily ritual of turning you into a person fit for society. Shirt, waistcoat, cravat, breeches, all layered with the fussy delicacy of someone decorating a particularly stubborn cake. You try to make conversation, but it's early, and neither of you wants to admit you can't remember if this is Tuesday or Thursday. You ask for your soft stockings. You get the scratchy pair. You sigh. He sighs. It's a fragile piece. By the time your wig is powdered and perched on your head like a judgy pigeon, you look presentable. You feel ridiculous. You're wearing more layers than a lasagna, and your boots pinch like they were invented as punishment for inherited wealth. Your morning toilette, the gentle art of becoming socially tolerable, includes dabbing scented water behind your ears, brushing your teeth with a twig dipped in soot, and enduring your barber's attempts at shaving you without slicing off a piece of ear. There's no deodorant, of course, just perfume, gallons of it, enough to make a horse sneeze. You don't wash, just mask. A system perfected by aristocrats and teenagers alike. The breakfast tray arrives, carried by a servant who looks like he hasn't slept since the last lunar eclipse. It's got bread, congealed porridge, and tea so weak it's basically water with trust issues. You nod politely. He nods back. No one says, thank you. It's not that kind of house. You glance around your room. It's lovely. If you ignore the smoke stains on the ceiling, the draft under the door, and the overwhelming smell of damp wool and human effort, your fireplace is finally lit, just as you're about to leave. Of course it is. That's tradition. And outside your room, an entire ecosystem of people making your day possible in the least efficient way imaginable. The scullery maid has been up since before dawn. The stable boy has already mucked 6 stalls and lost 1 glove to a temperamental mule. The butler has prepared your appointment schedule, which includes nap and look vaguely important in the drawing room. All of them working, all of them invisible, and all of them deeply aware that you can't boil water without summoning help, which, by the way, is exactly what you do next, because your bath is being prepared. And let me just say, you are not the one carrying buckets of hot water up 3 flights of stairs. Historians still debate whether this system, this intricate dance of reliance and resentment, produced better lives for anyone. The upper class had comfort, yes, but also no privacy, no independence, and no real idea how socks worked. The lower class had purpose. If that purpose involved constant toil, limited food, and a guaranteed back injury by age 25. One scholar called it mutual inconvenience. Another simply muttered, yikes. But here you are, mid yikes, toasting your feet by the fire someone else lit, in stockings someone else darned, sipping tea someone else poured. You're a figurehead on a very creaky ship, and you haven't even made it to the drawing room yet. This is your morning. Every day. You're clothed, fed, and technically upright, thanks entirely to people you barely acknowledge, in a house you don't understand, in a world where forgetting your servant's name is just good etiquette. And the best part? It's only 9 a.m. You'd like to begin your day with a light walk through the garden, or maybe a spot of reading, but no. Nature calls, or rather grumbles, and you're reminded that even the wealthiest bowels must eventually reckon with the reality of 18th century plumbing. Spoiler, there isn't any. Not unless you count the bucket under your bed and a flickering hope that your manservant remembered to empty it after last night's gout-inducing supper. The chamber pot, delicate in name only, is a squat metal horror with a lid that never quite fits and a handle designed specifically to burn your hand in winter. It's kept discreetly beneath your bed or behind a modest curtain. But modesty only stretches so far when you've got 2 footmen, a valet, and possibly a wandering dog in the room. Privacy is a modern concept, and here your bodily functions are as much a public event as your birthday. So you do what noble people have always done in the face of awkward necessity. You outsource it. You ring a small brass bell, and your valet arrives, stoic, silent, and so used to this part of the job that he might as well be furniture. He takes the pot. He vanishes. And you pretend the whole thing never happened, while silently praying you didn't make eye contact during the exchange. If you're lucky, you've got access to a more sophisticated facility, like the garderobe, a wooden box jutting out of the wall with a hole in it, suspended precariously above a pit that may or may not have been emptied this season. You perch like a nervous owl, hoping the draft doesn't turn into frostbite. And while you contemplate the void beneath you, you also contemplate your life choices, digestion, and the universal truth that no one looks noble while trying not to fall through a hole. Toilet paper? Try a square of linen, or hay, or a sponge on a stick if you're borrowing ideas from the Romans. Or, if you're feeling very traditional, just nothing. Let the wind do the work, as they say, though no one ever says it twice. Once you've survived the ordeal, it's time to wash up, which is to say, splash a little water on your hands from a porcelain basin and call it hygiene. Maybe some rose water if you're fancy. No soap unless you're French, and even then, it's more decorative than functional. The idea of scrubbing your hands to eliminate invisible germs? Hilarious. Germ theory hasn't been invented yet. People still think bad smells cause disease, which in fairness isn't entirely wrong when your servant forgets to empty the pot for a few days. Meanwhile, the downstairs world, your unseen engine room, is in full motion. A maid is scrubbing the floors with vinegar and desperation. A stable boy is mucking out a stall while reciting the Lord's Prayer for courage. And the laundress is staring blankly at a pile of soiled linens that includes at least one item she wishes she'd never seen. But back in your chamber, you're just trying to decide which britches won't make you look too bloated after last night's fifth helping of venison. Your valet lays out options like a waiter presenting desserts. This pair, milady, will pinch only slightly. That pair has a loose button. The third pair smells vaguely of mothballs and regret. You sigh. He sighs. You go with the mothballs. Outside your room, the hallway smells faintly of boiled cabbage, beeswax, and candle smoke. It's not unpleasant exactly, just familiar, like the scent of a castle slowly giving up. You pass a maid on the stairs. She curtsies so quickly, she nearly drops the coal scuttle. You nod in return. You don't know her name. She doesn't expect you to. Downstairs, the scullery maid is elbows deep in dishwater that hasn't been changed since last week. She's 13. Her hands are red and raw, and she's been up since 4, which, according to the cook, is basically sleeping in. The head housekeeper glides past like a warden in a corset, issuing orders with a whisper and a glare. The butler polishes silver in the parlor with the solemnity of a man dusting the crown jewels. You don't see any of this, of course. That's the point. A well-run household is one where the work is invisible. The help is silent, and the nobles never have to see how the sausage or the sausage roll is made. But make no mistake, it takes a veritable army to keep your bed warm, your chamber pot clean, and your breeches adequately aired. It's an entire machine built around the idea that you should never lift anything heavier than a wine glass, and even that only if the footman isn't nearby. Historians still argue whether this level of dependency made the upper classes more refined or just more ridiculous. One 19th century observer described the nobility as perched on a throne of cushions, but unable to find their own socks. Another noted, dryly, that if every servant in England walked out at once, half the lords would starve before figuring out how to open a pantry. You, of course, wouldn't starve. You'd just stand confused in the middle of your parlor, holding a spoon and wondering what it's for. Back in your room, your valet returns, with your now emptied chamber pot and a note from your cousin. You squint at it. Her handwriting is appalling. Something about supper and revenge. You nod, vaguely alarmed. You ask for a tea biscuit. He returns with 4, warm and only slightly burned. You thank him. Or maybe you just grunt. Same difference. And as the sunlight creeps in through the tall, grimy window, you stretch your arms like a satisfied cat, unaware, or perhaps just unbothered, that everything around you runs on someone else's time, someone else's labor, someone else's blistered hands. You look dignified, but really, you're just a very well-dressed adult baby, waiting to be fed, changed, and tucked in by a team of people who wish you'd trip on the rug just once. You make your way to the dining room, or rather you glide, because walking anywhere unaided is unseemly. A servant opens the door before you reach it. Another adjusts your chair. A third pours your tea, which tastes vaguely like disappointment and boiled weeds, but you sip it anyway, because this is breakfast, and breakfast is ceremony. The long oak table seats 20, though it's just you this morning. You sit at the far end, a lonely island in a sea of polished wood. Your plate is warm, Your eggs are cold. The toast is somehow burnt on one side and damp on the other, which is impressive in a way that defies physics. You chew politely. You nod vaguely at no one. You pretend this is enjoyable. A servant hovers at your elbow, trying to read your mind. Would you like more tea? A different jam? Less judgment? Too late. You've already been weighed, measured, and quietly deemed a handful before noon. The footman, poor lad, is new. You can tell because he pours the milk before the tea and nearly knocks over the sugar bowl trying to recover. He blinks in terror as you raise an eyebrow. You let it go, for now. You're not a monster. You're just mildly caffeinated and clothed in lace. The cook, several floors below, and three emotional breakdowns deep, waits anxiously for word of your verdict. She hasn't slept in 2 nights, 'cause your cousin offhandedly mentioned a fondness for duck livers, and now there are 6 in the larder and a tray of giblets no one asked for. Breakfast in a great house isn't about food, it's about hierarchy. The food merely provides the stage. You sit, others stand, you eat, others serve, and all of it, every clink of porcelain and rustle of linen, napkin, is part of an elaborate social performance where no one claps and everyone critiques silently. You try the jam. It's gooseberry. Of course it is. You hate gooseberry. You clear your throat slightly. Not a word, just a sound. But that sound travels. The footman stiffens. The maid watching from the corner glances at the jam jar with deep suspicion. Somewhere in the scullery, the cook starts composing her resignation letter in her head. Again. There's bread. It's warm. You take a bite and nearly lose a tooth to a raisin that's aged into something fossil adjacent. You chew anyway. Nobles chew everything politely. That's your job. That and owning 6 chairs you never sit in. And then, just as you're about to reach for another slice, it happens. A crash. From the hallway, you freeze. Everyone freezes. It's the unmistakable sound of porcelain meeting tile in a high-speed collision. A pause follows, long enough to contain 1,000 silent prayers and one distinct "oh no" from the clumsy new footman. He appears in the doorway, pale as candle wax, holding what remains of the teapot lid. You stare. He stammers. You blink slowly. A single drip of tea slides down his cuff like a tear. In another household, he might be dismissed on the spot, or demoted to window scrubbing, or sent to peel potatoes until his hands resemble ancient papyrus. But you're feeling merciful today, or at least too full of raisin brick to argue. You nod. Barely. He bows so low his wig slips sideways. Someone will fix it. Probably not him. Meanwhile, the other servants have taken note. A mistake was made. The master showed leniency. Interesting. The kitchen gossip network will be buzzing by lunch. Did you hear? He didn't even yell. Must be soft, or hung over, or in love. Theories bloom like mold on cheese. Historians still argue about how servant mistakes were handled in noble houses. Some accounts suggest brutality. Others imply a sort of cold, ritualized disappointment. Worse, in a way, because it gave no chance for redemption. One letter from a lady of the manor in 1784 mentions dismissing her maid for overboiling the carrots. Another from a duke recounts forgiving a butler who dropped a family heirloom because, quote, he wept like an honest idiot. Standards were subjective. Justice was elastic. But your standard this morning is simple. Don't make things worse. You finish your tea. It's lukewarm. You consider it a moral victory. Breakfast ends not with a thank you, but with a bell, a small silver one, which you ring delicately to signal that the performance is over and the cleanup crew may begin. Plates vanish. Crumbs are whisked away. The stain on the rug from yesterday's wine incident is still faintly visible, but someone will get to it, or cover it with another rug. Rugs are solutions. That's why you own nine. You rise from your chair with the grace of someone who's practiced. Your chair is pulled out for you. Your cloak is draped gently over your shoulders. You don't put it on. That's for someone else to manage. Buttons are beneath you. Zippers don't exist. Laces are a communal project. As you leave the room, you pass a row of servants standing with their eyes politely lowered. You nod at them. You don't know their names. You're not meant to. But they know yours. They know everything. They know which bread you like, how you take your tea, and the precise number of times you cleared your throat yesterday before demanding a different chair. They are the memory of the house, the whisperers, the watchers, the ones who make the whole thing work, and the ones who will carry you out when it stops. You step into the hallway, full of toast and pride. It's going to be a long day, but at least you didn't have to butter your own bread. And truly, isn't that what power is? You continue down the hall, gliding like someone who has never encountered a mop, much less wielded one, and yet the house around you pulses with life, a symphony of swishing skirts, clattering pails, and the quiet creak of floorboards beneath hurried feet you're never meant to hear. You are, after all, a noble. Your footsteps echo. Theirs must not. You pause by a window. A gardener is clipping hedges outside. Badly, in your opinion. He's wearing a hat too large for his head and humming something unrecognizably cheerful. He looks up, spots you watching, and instantly straightens, the hedge forgotten mid-snip. You nod. He bows. The rhythm resumes. He's clipping in straight lines now. You feel momentarily powerful, despite having no idea how hedges work. You turn and call for your footman. He doesn't respond. You try again, louder. Still nothing. A third call finally produces a maid, breathless and blinking like she's just run a marathon. She explains that your footman is currently retrieving a misplaced parcel from the stables, or possibly your cousin. The two apparently arrived at the same time and caused a bit of confusion. So here you are, standing awkwardly in a corridor that smells faintly of beeswax and parsnips, waiting for someone to retrieve your walking stick. You could walk back to your chamber and get it yourself. But no, that is not done. That is how accidents happen, like sore knees or self-reliance. Eventually, the footman returns, slightly pink-faced and holding the stick as if it were the crown jewels. You take it without a word, not out of rudeness, but because the silence is part of the pageantry. Your gratitude, like your meals, is supposed to be subtle and preferably implied by your continued employment of the help. You descend the staircase, or rather, you allow gravity and a well-placed banister to assist you. Your footman trails 3 steps behind. Any closer, and it's improper. Any farther, and he risks being too slow to catch you should you trip on the tasseled rug that some sadist designed without consulting physics. Halfway down, a younger servant darts across the hallway below with a tray of jam jars. She sees you too late. There's a flurry of motion, a clink of glass, a muffled curse she hopes you didn't hear, and then, miraculously, she vanishes around a corner without spilling a thing. You don't comment. You're impressed. But silence, once again, is how nobles say, "Good job." Downstairs, the help is buzzing like bees trapped in starched uniforms. You enter the drawing room. It's lovely, mostly unused, decorated to impress guests you secretly can't stand. A fire crackles in the hearth, freshly stoked by someone you didn't see. The chairs are precisely fluffed, the curtains drawn just so. The tea tray awaits. You didn't ask for it, you don't need to. That's the point. Historians still argue whether the sprawling teams of servants in great houses were a sign of progress or just highly stratified helplessness. Some say it created efficiency, others say it bred absurdity. One account describes a nobleman who required three servants to help him put on a single glove, one to hold the glove, one to steady the hand, and one to ensure he didn't pass out from the effort. And yet, for all their fuss, nobles of the past were often left stranded by the simplest of needs. Want to send a letter? Call the footman. Need more candles? Ring for the chambermaid. Misplace your own slippers? Panic, then delegate. Independence wasn't a virtue, it was suspicious. If you tried to light your own fire, someone would assume you were either possessed or dangerously poor. You sit in the armchair nearest the window because the sunlight falls there just right in the mornings. You read a book you've read 5 times before, not for content, but for posture. You want to be seen reading it when your cousin arrives. She's always judging your tastes, especially since the poetry debacle of last spring. There's a knock at the door. A servant opens it, announces your cousin's name with the practiced theatricality of someone who has done this too many times. She enters, trailing perfume, gossip, and contempt hidden behind a smile. She compliments your hair. You pretend not to notice her smirking at your boots. She sits. She does not pour her own tea. Of course not. That's the butler's job. He's hovering just outside the frame of this scene, anticipating every need with the quiet desperation of someone who's memorized your cousin's sugar preference down to the last grain. She asks how your morning has been. You say uneventful, which is code for I watched a servant drop a pot and no one died. She laughs politely. You both sip. You both judge. The drawing room is a battlefield of smiles and passive aggression. And the servants? They're the ammunition. They carry your letters, your trays, your whispered slanders, disguised as polite observations. One servant re enters with a fresh plate of biscuits. Your cousin eyes them. Too crisp, she mutters. She doesn't eat one, but she makes sure the maid hears. The maid nods, bows, leaves. Internally, she's composing a scathing haiku. Outside, a boy is sweeping the front steps. Inside, another is polishing the already polished banister. They move through the house like shadows, keeping it running, keeping it clean, and occasionally rolling their eyes where no one noble can see. You and your cousin talk for another 20 minutes about lace, about letters, about nothing, really. And then she stands, announces she must leave to check on the estate, which everyone knows is code for napping and eavesdropping. You don't walk her out. That's the servant's job. You stay seated, back straight, gaze lifted, as if your role in this house is celestial rather than deeply, deeply ornamental. Once she's gone, the butler returns, silently clears the tray. You nod. He nods. And just like that, the entire social ballet resets, waiting for the next performance. You sigh. Not from exhaustion, but from the sheer absurdity of being so surrounded by people, yet so entirely alone in your own home. And then you ring for the maid, because someone's moved your cushion again, and truly, that's not something you're equipped to handle. You retreat from the drawing room with the graceful urgency of someone fleeing both conversation and the lingering scent of your cousin's over-applied rosewater. It follows you, cloying and judgmental, all the way down the corridor. You head toward your dressing chamber, or perhaps the library. It's difficult to decide without a servant to open the door and remind you what's behind it. But before you reach either destination, you realize something alarming. You've misplaced your gloves. Panic is too strong a word, mild aristocratic inconvenience perhaps, but you can already feel the fabric of your day unraveling. You can't be seen in public without gloves. That's practically scandalous. It suggests effort, or worse, thrift. You call for your valet. He appears instantly and unflustered, as if he'd been waiting just around the corner, like a particularly loyal specter. You ask about the gloves. He disappears. He returns. He disappears again. You didn't think it was possible to lose 4 pairs of gloves in one house, but here you are, noble, gloveless, and gently spiraling. Eventually, he finds a pair tucked behind the writing desk, possibly dropped during your dramatic poetry reading last night. You slip them on. They're slightly mismatched, but you don't mention it. Neither does he. That's the unspoken pact. You don't acknowledge his eye roll when you demanded silk instead of suede, and he doesn't mention that one of the gloves smells vaguely of mutton. This is how your day works. For every simple task, dressing, walking, locating your own possessions, there are at least 3 people involved and 1 dog underfoot. Servants move in and out of rooms like ghosts with errands. Some dust, some carry, some hover like nervous punctuation marks. And yet somehow, the room you need is never the one they're in. You enter the study. A stack of correspondence awaits, delivered on a silver tray you'll never touch and open by someone else's hands. Your secretary has sorted them into categories. Invitations, you'll decline. Requests for money, you'll also decline. And 1 letter from an aunt you can't ignore. You ask for a pen. A quill appears. You ask for ink. It's already there. You ask for quiet. And that's where the system stumbles, because just outside the study door, a maid is arguing in the hallway, softly, urgently, with a scullery boy about whether the wine cellar key is missing or just locked inside itself. You raise an eyebrow. The footman stationed outside your door coughs loudly. The voices cease. Silence, bought with a polite throat noise. Efficient. You draft your reply to the aunt. Warm, vague, and just specific enough to avoid a visit. Your secretary will rewrite it legibly later. You don't write to be read. You write to be quoted. Then, with a deep dramatic sigh designed to suggest exhaustion rather than boredom, you rise. It's time to go outside, or at least pretend you might. You need your boots. You ring for them. 5 minutes later, your valet returns, not with the boots, but with a question. Do you want the brown pair with the brass buckles, or the slightly more weathered pair with the subtle tear on the left heel? You choose the latter, because it suggests humility, and because you want people to think you walk more than you do. By the time they're fetched, shined, and placed before you like an offering, your enthusiasm for walking has waned considerably. You stare at the boots stare back. You decide you'll go out later. Instead, you wander to the library. You don't open a book. That's not the point. The point is to be seen among books, like a cat choosing a bookshelf to nap near. You sit in your favorite chair, the one no one else is allowed to use, and you glance at the fireplace. It's not lit. You ring for the fire to be lit. 3 servants arrive. 1 opens the flue. 1 brings logs. The 3rd seems to be there purely for supervision or morale. They build a fire with the solemnity of monks preparing for midnight mass. You watch. mildly fascinated until you grow tired of their presence and dismiss them with a nod. The room smells like smoke and pine resin. You feel rustic, briefly. As the flames catch, a breeze slips under the library door. You shiver, not dramatically, just enough to convey subtle suffering. Within seconds, someone returns with a lap blanket. You don't ask where it came from. You assume it's been warmed by proximity to a fire that was lit 2 rooms over, just in case you might someday enter it. You drape it over your knees with a flourish that suggests you survived something. And this is where the afternoon finds you. In a room you didn't clean, beside a fire you didn't build, wrapped in a blanket someone else chose for you, contemplating a book you'll never read. Historians still discuss the logistics of large estates with equal parts awe and horror. It's estimated that the average noble household employed between 10 and 50 servants at any one time, not including seasonal hires, coachmen, or the boy who just stood near the door in case someone needed to be fetched. One estate in Yorkshire reportedly had a servant whose sole job was to iron shoelaces. You haven't reached that level of extravagance, but give it time. This system is deeply efficient and wildly inefficient. Everything happens. Nothing happens quickly. Tasks are completed, often twice and occasionally backwards. But the illusion of seamlessness remains. That's the real currency here. Not wealth, not land, but the ability to glide through a day without ever lifting anything heavier than your own sense of entitlement. You stretch, you yawn. Not from effort, heavens no, but from the sheer, soul deep fatigue of witnessing other people be productive on your behalf. You consider lunch, then consider a nap, then consider lunch again. You ring for someone to help you decide. Lunch is not a matter of eating, it is a matter of orchestration, a delicate operation involving at least a dozen people, 3 courses, and one cook who may or may not be crying into a tureen. You, of course, do none of this. Your only contribution is selecting the cravat that most discourages conversation. You go with the soft gray. It says, I'm approachable, but in a way that also says, please don't. You make your way to the dining hall, a room far too large for its purpose, and about 6 degrees colder than comfort would suggest. The table is long. You sit alone again. Unless your cousin decides to reappear, something you suspect based on the presence of 2 extra napkins and 1 ominously full wine decanter. You sit, chairs shift, napkins flutter, water is poured, then poured again because the first pour wasn't symmetrical. Your soup arrives. It's lukewarm, which is ideal because that means it's not hot enough to burn your tongue or cold enough to offend your sense of privilege. You sip. It's parsnip. Again. You wonder aloud, in a tone as soft as lace, whether perhaps the cook might consider a pea puree tomorrow. The footman doesn't respond. He just tightens his jaw the way a man might when imagining moving to another country. While you eat, the servants hover, not in a menacing way, more like furniture with judgment. The butler stands in the corner, stiff as a wax statue, ready to nod if you so much as look confused by the fish fork. The maid replaces your napkin the moment you drop it. One particularly vigilant lad refills your wine glass every time it dips below 3/4 full, which means by the time the roast arrives, you're mildly tipsy and very ready to forgive the overcooked potatoes. The roast, by the way, is goose. Again, possibly the same goose from last week, just reincarnated with extra herbs. You don't complain, not because it's good, but because the last time you did, the cook went silent for 3 days and the pudding came out oddly salty. Historians still debate whether these kinds of lunch services were meant for nourishment or theater. Some records suggest nobles consumed meals slowly to emphasize leisure. Others claim the multi course format was designed to employ more staff. One particularly sassy footnote in a 17th century diary simply reads, "The veal was dry. We discussed Latin until someone choked." You don't discuss Latin. You don't discuss anything really. You eat, you chew, you stare at the ceiling moldings and wonder when was the last time someone cleaned up there. Then remember, not your problem. Meanwhile, the kitchen is a battlefield. Below stairs, servants are dodging each other like dancers in a tragic ballet. The scullery maid is elbow deep in greasy plates. The cook is shouting something about never trusting a Tuesday turnip, and a boy is carefully scraping burnt pudding from the bottom of a pan with the kind of focus normally reserved for surgery. The kitchen fire is hot enough to blister walls, the air thick with smoke and passive aggression. Someone dropped a spoon earlier. It was dramatic. There was weeping. A footman tripped on a cat that may or may not belong to anyone. And through it all, your meal arrived. Warm. Complete. Slightly disappointing. As expected. Back in the dining room, you finish your pudding, fig and treacle, the dessert of people who don't fear dental work. You dab your lips with your napkin, which someone will now boil, bleach, and iron with more care than you give your own letters. You rise. A servant pushes your chair back. Two others clear the table in synchronized silence. The show is over. You consider thanking them, but that would feel strange. You've never thanked a doorknob for opening or a curtain for fluttering. These people are part of the architecture, helpful, necessary, but invisible, like the wind. If the wind polished your silver and knew how to debone a fish, still, you offer a nod. One of those dignified, barely there nods that says, "I noticed you, but not too much." It's the closest thing to affection you're allowed. You exit the room and, out of habit, walk toward the parlor. On the way, you pass the library again. A maid is dusting the shelves. She does not stop when you enter. She merely lowers her eyes and adjusts her angle so she's not bending over while in your line of sight. She's been trained to do this. She's probably 16 and already knows 4 ways to remove wax from drapes. You don't speak. She doesn't speak. But there's a moment, a flicker, where her expression tightens just enough to suggest she knows exactly how many raisins you left on your pudding plate. She'll tell the others. They always do. The servant network is more efficient than any postal system. Information flows up, down, sideways. If you sneeze before breakfast, the housekeeper knows before lunch. If you say something scandalous during supper, the coachman hears it by morning. It's not gossip, it's infrastructure. And you, noble as you are, exist at the center of it, like a well-fed, mildly oblivious star. You shine. They orbit. Occasionally, you explode. Back in the parlor, you settle into a chaise that someone fluffed in advance. The pillow smells faintly of lavender and someone else's labor. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to enjoy the sensation of having nothing to do. And in the background, the servants keep moving. They sweep. They polish. They fold things into shapes that no one appreciates. You hear a soft knock. A girl enters with a fresh tray. Tea, biscuits, more jam. Gooseberry again. Of course. You sigh. She hears it. Her hands tighten on the tray. The tea is poured. You drink You nibble. You listen to the faint ticking of a clock that someone else wound for you. Your feet are warm. Your cup is full. Your sense of self sufficiency is nil. And yet somehow you feel very accomplished. You've survived lunch. You awaken from your post lunch haze, not quite a nap, not quite alertness, to the gentle clink of porcelain. Someone is clearing your untouched biscuits again. They do this every day. You never eat them, but they always return. It's a ritual. Like the tides or your cousin's passive aggressive letters. Your stomach is full. Your dignity, perhaps less so, given you just drooled slightly on the chaise. You casually wipe it with a cuff someone else will launder. You pretend not to notice the maid, pretending not to notice. It's a delicate choreography of mutual embarrassment and denial. You sit up slowly, like a Roman statue with back problems. Time to stretch your legs, you think. But not outdoors, of course. That would require boots, weather, and interacting with nature. Instead, you opt for a visit to the kitchen. Not to work, heavens no. To observe, to inspect. Like a duchess of efficiency, armed with vague curiosity and zero relevant skills. As you approach the kitchen, the temperature rises noticeably. The air thickens. You smell onions, sweat, and singed pastry. It's like stepping into a casserole. You instantly regret it. No one notices you at first. They're too busy surviving. A scullery maid is scraping something stubborn off a copper pan. The cook is barking orders like a military general with gout. And a boy, maybe 12, maybe 30, it's hard to tell, through the soot, is turning a spit over a fire large enough to summon dragons. The Spit Boy, a living, breathing reminder that not all historical roles come with charming titles or clean fingernails. He spends hours each day slowly rotating meat over an open flame. His arms ache. His face is greasy. His soul has long since floated out through the chimney, but he turns that spit with the solemn duty of someone who knows exactly how much trouble awaits if the goose comes out unevenly cooked. You clear your throat. The room freezes. A dozen eyes land on you, some fearful, some resentful. One, frankly, murderous. You say something meaningless. Smells lovely in here, and the room exhales. They nod. Smile politely. Resume work. You've done your part. You've mingled with the help. Tomorrow's gossip will include phrases like, the master came down himself and looked at the meat with interest, which is almost true. You wander farther in, hands clasped behind your back, like an emperor evaluating soup. You nod at a tray of bread. You admire a pot of something boiling ominously. You notice a rat dart under a sack of flour. No one flinches. The rat probably works here. Historians have a hard time agreeing on how kitchens truly functioned in grand estates. Some say they were efficient hives of activity. Others describe them as smoky dungeons filled with chaos and tears. Both are accurate. At any given moment, someone was either perfecting a sauce or melting down entirely. The head cook, a stout woman with arms like loaves and a gaze that could curdle milk, approaches you. She smiles tightly. Anything we can prepare for this afternoon? My lord, you consider this. You consider saying something sophisticated like, perhaps a light galette. But you say, I'm not sure. She nods as if you've said something deeply wise. You both pretend this was helpful. To your left, a boy drops a bowl. It shatters. The noise is loud, sharp, final. He goes very still. The cook wheels around. Her eyes flash. For a moment, time itself holds its breath. You speak before she can. No harm done. She glances at you, then at the boy, then back at the bowl. She nods once. Crisis averted. You've saved a servant from a scolding, or possibly saved yourself from witnessing one. The boy meets your eyes for a split second. It's not gratitude, it's surprise. You turn and leave before your boots can pick up the scent of turnip stew. Back in the hallway, you exhale. The kitchen is not your world, it's a world beneath your world. It runs on heat, motion, and a hierarchy as rigid as your dining table's centerpiece. No one rests, no one smiles unless they must. And yet, the house depends on it completely. You pass a pantry. It smells of cheese and quiet despair. A maid emerges carrying 6 jars, one broom, and the kind of expression usually found in martyrs. You offer a nod. She doesn't see it, or pretends not to. It's fine. You'll survive. Returning to the drawing room feels like crawling back into a painting. The air is perfumed. The fire is artfully low. Your chair is just as you left it, fluffed and faintly warm. Someone must have pre-warmed the cushion. You don't ask who. That knowledge is above your pay grade, even if you technically don't have one. You sit. You think about what you saw. You think about the cook's furious grace, the scullery maid's red hands, the boy at the spit who now lives in your head like a ghost in an apron. You think about how much work happens so you can pretend nothing ever happens at all. Historians still debate whether the nobility were aware of this imbalance. Some say they were perfectly conscious of it and simply didn't care. Others suggest they lived in a dream of civility and lace, so cocooned by ritual that the reality of labor never truly reached them. One academic called it ornate blindness. Another called it privilege-induced amnesia. You're not sure what to call it, but you know you're hungry again. You ring for a biscuit. It arrives moments later. Warm. Not gooseberry. Progress. The maid sets it down without a word. As she turns to leave, she pauses, just for a second, then glances back at you, eyes steady. You offer something rare. Thank you. She doesn't reply, but her steps sound different on the way out. Lighter. Small revolutions begin with small kindnesses, and one room over, the cook is yelling again. The spit still turns. The soup still boils. The world still works, just beneath your feet. You're feeling rather pleased with yourself now. A biscuit in your belly, a half-formed sense of benevolence blooming quietly in your chest, and the satisfying knowledge that you've wandered through the kitchen without fainting or catching fire. It's the little victories. You wander the house in slow circles, like a monarch doing laps in their own museum. Each room hums with invisible labor. You don't need to knock, doors open, just before you touch them. You don't need to speak. Servants read your intentions like tea leaves. You're less a person, more a moving symbol of power wrapped in layers of scented fabric. And then you enter your own bedchamber, where the truly intimate theater of servanthood unfolds. Your chambermaid is there. She curtsies deeply, eyes down. She's changed your linens, fluffed the pillows, folded the socks that you'll never wear, and rearranged your shaving set so it aligns precisely with the sunbeam from the east-facing window. You don't greet her by name. You don't have to. But she knows yours. Along with your preferred hair tonic, your midnight snacking habits, and the fact that you talk in your sleep about something called Margaret. You don't know any Margarets, or so you claim. She moves through the room like a shadow that's been formally trained. You sit in your chair. She polishes your boots. You glance toward the wardrobe, and without a word, she's there, pulling out tomorrow's clothes, brushing them, spotting tiny imperfections you'd never see. You clear your throat. She fetches water. You sigh. She fetches wine. It's intimate but impersonal, close but never familiar. Yet this woman, This quiet figure with the calm hands and permanent eye bags knows you in ways no friend ever will. She knows where you toss your stockings, how your shoulders slump when you're defeated, and how you sometimes stare into the fire like you're waiting for it to tell you a secret. She also knows you haven't cleaned your ears properly in 2 weeks. Historians still muse about this curious imbalance, the way servants occupied the most private corners of their employers' lives without being allowed to participate in them. Your maid dresses you, bathes you, disposes of your bodily waste, and ensures your wig doesn't look like a confused poodle. And yet she is, officially, invisible. But invisibility has its perks, because while you sit there thinking about supper and socks, she's already pieced together the full plot of your family's drama from half heard whispers, mislaid letters, and the contents of your laundry basket. The help always knows. Your butler knows when you've had too much wine. Your valet knows you cried into your cravat after last year's duel. The stable boy knows you can't ride without panicking slightly at squirrels. And the cook, God help you, knows you're allergic to oysters but eat them anyway because your cousin once called them virile. And they talk. Oh, how they talk. Servants gossip like it's a competitive sport. Downstairs, there are entire soap operas unfolding, built entirely from your eyebrow twitches and half finished notes. Your mild cough becomes a wasting disease. Your canceled hunting trip becomes a secret affair. Your quiet walks in the garden? Definitely witchcraft or poetry. Even now, as you sip your wine and pretend to read, your maid is mentally drafting the next chapter in your household fan fiction. She knows that you've been glancing toward the window every evening around the same time. She suspects you're waiting for someone. She has theories. So does the footman who spotted you pacing in your robe. So does the gardener who noticed the same boot prints in the same part of the path every day for a week. So does the laundress who found a monogrammed handkerchief that doesn't belong to you. They don't speak of these things upstairs. But downstairs, oh, it's open season. One household in 1789 was reportedly run entirely on gossip. The cook would only prepare meals if she heard a positive rumor about herself that week. The valet threatened to expose the lord's gambling debts unless he was given better boots. The chambermaid wrote anonymous poems mocking the mistress's wig, which were so good they were published. Servants knew everything, and they weaponized it, subtly, quietly, with a kind of passive defiance that made their invisible presence feel, at times, omnipotent. Back in your chamber, your maid finishes folding the laundry and steps back. You nod. She curtsies again, leaves. She will return later to stoke the fire. Draw the curtains and ensure your nightshirt is aired and folded. She will speak just twice, once to ask if you need anything, and once to bid you good night. You will grunt. She will understand. You don't consider how strange it is that another human being quietly witnesses your entire existence without ever being invited to participate in it. You don't wonder what she thinks of your letters, or your posture, or your strange collection of goose-themed cufflinks. But she has opinions. Oh, does she have opinions? And so does your valet, who enters next with your evening coat and a faint expression of concern masked as neutrality. He notices the half-finished wine, the disheveled cravat, the slightly rumpled cuff. He makes a mental note. Not because he cares about fashion, but because someone will ask him about it later. He helps you change. You raise your arms like a child. He buttons your shirt. He fixes the collar. He fluffs your wig. You look into the mirror and see someone entirely put together by someone else's hands. He finishes, steps back, says nothing, just waits. You nod. He nods. You both pretend that this isn't weird at all. The truth is, your household is run by people who know more about you than you do, and who could, at any moment, undo you with a sentence, a story, or a smirk. But they don't. Because the system, bizarre as it is, holds together with the strange glue of mutual dependence and shared silence. You rely on them. They rely on your ignorance. It's a pact. It's a game. It's history, humming softly beneath your floorboards. You walk toward the drawing room again. Downstairs, your maid is already telling the footman what your expression looked like when you spilled wine on your stocking. He'll laugh. He'll embellish. By tomorrow, you'll have cried and blamed the dog. And you'll never know. You enter the drawing room once more, that sacred shrine of inactivity. The fire's been poked into a pleasing crackle. The cushions have been plumped into submission, and someone's managed to banish the faint smell of wet wool that usually clings to old upholstery and your cousin's choice of overcoats. You're not alone. The spaniel's here, snoring gently by the hearth, its fur suspiciously cleaner than yours. Someone has brushed it. Not you, possibly not even someone human. In this house, animals are sometimes attended to more promptly than guests. A tray of brandy awaits on the side table. 2 glasses, not one. A silent hint from the butler that you might be receiving company, or that he hopes you will because he's worried you've been talking too much to the portraits again. You sit, the brandy is poured, you lift the glass and take a sip. It's warm, spiced, and expensive. You didn't select it. The butler did. He always chooses better than you would. He knows your taste even when you forget to have one. You stare into the flames and pretend to think deep thoughts. Mostly, you're wondering how many of the household staff are currently working just out of view. A dozen? 2 dozen? Is someone polishing spoons right now? Refolding napkins for the 3rd time? Brushing your least favorite shoes just in case? Yes. Yes, they are. Upstairs and downstairs, the day never really stops. Even now, in this cozy lull before supper, a whirlwind of preparation continues behind the velvet curtain of upper-class leisure. Sheets are aired. Logs are stacked. Spoons are counted. And someone, somewhere, is furiously trying to remove a butter stain from your cravat using a method involving lemon juice, witchcraft, and silent sobbing. You stretch. The chair creaks beneath you in solidarity. You wonder, not for the first time, if anyone's ever really taken a break in this house. You do, obviously, frequently. But the servants? They seem to live in a constant state of mild panic with occasional biscuit breaks. The maid brings a book. She places it on the side table, where you can see it and ignore it at your leisure. You nod at her. She gives the tiniest of curtsies and slips out. Noiseless as a sigh, you pick up the book. It's one of your favorites. You've read the first chapter 17 times and never made it further. That's not the book's fault. That's Brandy's fault. And your pillows. And the fact that someone, somewhere, is always clinking something in the hallway, just as the plot gets going. You pretend to read. Your eyes skim. Your fingers turn pages. But mostly, you're aware of the room, the warmth, the quiet industry, the invisible web of activity, holding everything in place. And just outside the door, someone is ironing your tablecloth with the kind of precision that borders on art. Historians still debate the mental toll of this lopsided social structure. Was it comforting to be so cared for, so constantly cushioned from reality? Or did it erode one's sense of self, turning even basic independence into an exotic concept? One scholar noted that nobles in the 18th century were so rarely alone that many developed a pathological fear of silence. Another claimed they simply became terrible at entertaining themselves. You feel neither. You feel floaty. Brandy will do that. And in your floatiness, your thoughts wander to the people currently maintaining this illusion of peaceful grandeur, like the housemaid, who wakes before dawn to re-blacken the fireplace you haven't noticed in a decade, or the boy who trims candle wicks to the precise, absurd regulation length demanded by some footman's manual from 1723, or the poor soul who manages your wardrobe, a labyrinth of coats, breeches, and hats so numerous they're probably breeding in there. You once heard a story about a noblewoman who had a maid whose sole job was to dust the feathers in her hats. The feathers, not the hats themselves, just the plumage. And the maid took it seriously because being the feather girl was still better than being the chamber pot girl. Everyone in the house has a title, not always official, but known: the button boy, the shoe whisperer, the one who carries the hot water but never looks you in the eye. Their work is repetitive, backbreaking, occasionally humiliating, and they do it with a professionalism that puts your cousin's estate management to shame, which isn't hard, really. He once tried to sell the same plot of land twice, not realizing it had already been lost in a card game to a bishop, but your staff, they remember everything. They track schedules with terrifying precision. They know that every third Thursday you like mutton, and on foggy days you complain about phantom drafts. They know where you left your glove, which door creaks, and how to vanish mid conversation without ever quite seeming rude. They are the machine. You are the bell they answer. You set down the book. You haven't read a word. You sip your brandy. You haven't tasted it in 3 minutes. You listen, not to the fire, but to the faint symphony of life beyond the walls. A clatter in the pantry. Someone dropped a spoon. A faint shh. Someone smoothing linen. A soft, muffled laugh, too rare to be ignored. You wonder what they're laughing about. Probably not you. Hopefully not you. Okay, almost certainly you. You remember yesterday's incident with the spilled ink and the yelp that sounded suspiciously like a startled goat? Yes, they're definitely still laughing about that, and they should. It was spectacular. You'd laugh too if the ink weren't still visible on your best boots. Your cousin enters the room without knocking. Naturally, she sits, helps herself to the second glass of brandy. Doesn't ask, doesn't thank. You don't mind. This is how it works. Upstairs, things are polite in form but rarely in practice. Downstairs, they're blunt in speech but sharp in observation. Your hair looks upright, she says. You smile. So does yours. She raises her glass. You both drink. Servants bring supper soon. You don't notice them enter. You barely see them leave. But the plates are there, the food is hot, and the illusion continues. And just like that, you drift through another hour wrapped in silk, warmed by someone else's fire, and carried by the quiet strength of people whose names you'll never say aloud, but whose efforts you wear, eat, sit on, sleep in, and depend upon. The brandy is good. You forget to ask why, but someone knows. You don't remember when supper began. You're not even sure you noticed it arriving. But there it is now, warm and precise, as if the table summoned it of its own accord. Roast beef with horseradish, a side of something green, likely boiled into a shade not found in nature, gravy with the consistency of regret, and at the center of it all, you, freshly cravated and half-focused, chewing politely, while your cousin recounts a story about someone else's scandal that may or may not involve you. A servant steps forward, silently replaces your water. Another repositions the cutlery, which had the audacity to sit half an inch askew. You do not acknowledge them, not because you're cruel, but because this is the pact. You pretend they aren't there, and they pretend you're more important than you are. Your cousin is still talking. Something about a ruined ball, and a ruined dress, and a ruined family name. You nod in the right places. The beef is surprisingly good. Possibly a new butcher. You consider asking the cook's name, but that might imply you care, and caring makes people nervous. She pauses to sip her wine, your cousin, not the cook, and glances towards the chandelier. Still crooked, she says. You look up. She's right. It's tilted, just slightly, possibly since last winter's snowstorm, or since the stable boy used the broom handle to play at sword fighting again. Either way, someone will fix it. Someone always does. It might be the footman who knows how to balance on a ladder with uncanny grace, or the maid who once rewired the sconces using only hairpins and spite. You'll never see them do it. You'll just wake up one morning and find everything symmetrical again, as if the house has self-healed. After supper, you and your cousin drift into the salon, where music is softly playing on the harpsichord. You didn't ask for it. Someone simply remembered. You enjoy it on Thursday evenings, especially if the weather has been emotionally damp, as you once phrased it. The music is pleasant. The brandy again has refilled itself. A servant lingers in the doorway, awaiting instructions that will never come because your cousin has declared she's positively exhausted and is leaving early. You walk her to the door, not out of courtesy, but because you're hoping she forgot her gloves again. She didn't. Shame. Back in the salon, the air is quiet. The staff is already resetting the evening. Slippers near the hearth, candles trimmed, your nightcap laid out like a fabric comma at the edge of your pillow. You sit again, and then the thought hits you. You have not touched a single object all day that was not first handled, prepared, or pre-approved by someone else. Not your food, not your clothes, not your books, your chair, your wine, or even your dog. Every part of your day has passed through another person's hands before it reached you. Quiet hands, quick hands, often chapped, usually calloused, and never acknowledged. Historians still debate the emotional consequences of such a system. Some suggest the nobility became detached from reality. Others argue that reality was simply different for them. It didn't come with chores or choices. It came with waiting hands and full plates and furniture that polished itself if you looked away long enough. But every now and then, you get a glimpse beneath the surface, like when you pass the stairwell and see the footman asleep sitting up, boots still on, hat tilted forward like he's pretending not to be alive. Or when you catch the laundress muttering to herself, folding the same shirt 3 times to stay out of a shouting match, 2 rooms over. Or when you notice the cook's daughter slipping jam into her pocket because you told the kitchen not to serve sweets, and someone still has a sweet tooth. These aren't performances. These are the moments the house exhales. You once heard a tale, possibly true, possibly invented by your valet to discourage you from wearing velvet in summer, of a duke who lost half his staff in a single week. Not to illness, not to revolution, to exhaustion. One fainted into a stew. One fell asleep in the garden and was mistaken for a shrub. The rest simply walked away. The house stopped functioning within hours. The Duke couldn't tie his shoes, couldn't find his wig powder, couldn't summon tea without shouting into empty hallways. He was dressed eventually by a cousin. He never recovered. You smile at the memory, real or not. You look around your drawing room, every candle lit, every curtain drawn, a glass of water, room temperature, beside your seat. You didn't ask for it. You never do. But someone, somewhere, remembered that cold water makes your teeth ache. And there it is. The upstairs downstairs dance. You float through your day like a cloud in tailored breeches. They toil through it like gears inside a grandfather clock. Silent, precise, always a little dusty. You don't see the mop water sloshed up the back stairs, or the burnt fingertips from handling hot trays, or the 5-minute dinner breaks taken standing, because chairs are for people who don't fetch chairs for a living. But the system keeps turning, because your comfort depends on their discomfort, your ease on their endless hustle, your dignity on their discretion. It's a machine powered by human exhaustion and social contracts written in whispers. You rise. Your body protests mildly. The day has been long, or rather, the brandy has. You make your way to your chamber. Your slippers are already waiting, turned slightly outward. Your robe is warmed. Your sheets are folded back in a triangle sharp enough to signal military readiness. You don't question how it got that way. You don't ask who lit the candles or how they knew to trim the wick so precisely. You just settle into the bed and sigh. The world outside may spin, tumble, rise, and revolt. But here, your pillow smells faintly of lavender, and someone has already placed tomorrow's socks by the fire. The bed embraces you like a particularly fussy cloud, feather stuffed, linen wrapped, and probably just slightly damp from the medieval concept of freshness. Someone has warmed the sheets with a pan of coals, long removed. The warmth remains. The scorch marks do not. You assume, with mild gratitude, that someone replaced the mattress cover after last week's incident with the late night wine and the dramatically tipped candlestick. You settle in, not quite ready to sleep, not quite ready to do anything else, which is a familiar state for you, comfortably inert. The room glows softly with candlelight, flickering just enough to create the illusion that time is still moving, even if you're not. Then you hear it, footsteps, not the heavy kind that herald a footman delivering dramatic news or a cousin seeking second supper. These are soft, practiced, slippered, the kind that belong to someone who's been trained to walk like a polite roomer. It's your night servant, a rotating position depending on who drew the short straw in the servant lottery. Tonight, it's the chambermaid, and she glides in with a porcelain basin and the tired dignity of someone who has already boiled water 6 times today and suspects she'll do it again before dawn. She sets the basin down on the washstand. You nod. She nods. Neither of you says a word. She pours gently. The water steams, not boiling. Someone remembered your delicate wrists. Bless them. She lays out your towel, coarse, hand-woven, and unmistakably scrubbed within an inch of its existence. You dab at your face. She adjusts the window shutters. You rinse your hands. She fluffs the pillow you aren't using. This is the ritual. 2 people sharing space, not conversation. One trying to relax, the other trying not to be seen exhaling too loudly. You thank her quietly. She curtsies, and then she's gone. And now the house is still. Except, of course it isn't, because somewhere below you, behind the plaster and paneling, the nighttime economy of servants continues. The boots are being lined up. The dishes are being washed for the second time. A boy is being shouted at for not properly rinsing the spit before storing it. The head housekeeper is doing rounds with the severity of a general and the bun of a woman who's outlived 6 lords. You, meanwhile, lie in bed, thinking about nothing and everything. You think about the way the house never sleeps. Not really. The way it breathes beneath you, sighing through beams and footsteps and the occasional muffled sneeze from someone with hay allergies, and no escape from dried rushes. You think about your valley, folding your morning breeches with mathematical precision, about the cook, who probably burned her hand again but didn't mention it, about the girl in the laundry who sang to herself once, not knowing you were listening, and hasn't made a sound since. Historians still argue whether noble bedrooms were truly restful. Some were palatial, others were windowless tombs of draught and damp. What united them wasn't design, it was dependency. Every element of bedtime comfort was staged by someone else. Fires lit, linens changed, robes laid out like flattened versions of yourself. Even your dreams feel prearranged, because how can you dream freely when every waking moment is scaffolded by invisible effort? You shift under the blankets. A spring pokes your hip, straw mattress, slightly overused. You make a mental note to have it rotated, which means someone else will do it silently, probably while you're in another room discussing wigs or the state of France. You hear a creak in the hallway. Floorboards you've never personally tested, each one with a name in someone's logbook. They know which ones squeak, which ones betray a sneaking servant, which ones are safe. This is their landscape. You just inhabit it like a polite overlord in soft slippers. You close your eyes, try to relax, but you can't help imagining the rest of the house. The maid with the candle, walking back to her shared room in the attic. The boy in the cellar, sleeping next to sacks of potatoes. The stable hand, nodding off with his boots still on and a straw hat pulled over his face. The butler upright in his own chair, eyes closed but brain still calculating tomorrow's napkin layout, all of them still moving, or just beginning to still. And then there's you, fed, fluffed, and folded into bed like a noble burrito. You're not ashamed of it. You're not ungrateful, but you are, vaguely, aware that your entire life is a play performed around you by a troupe of actors who never get to take a bow. The night continues. You shift. The fire crackles softly. It was tended perfectly, just enough coal to last till morning. Not so much that you wake up sweating like a poached goose. You breathe deeply, almost serenely. Then you hear it, a thump. It's distant, not alarming, but noticeable. You listen, nothing. Then another thump, followed by the faintest giggle. Two servants, clearly, attempting to move something large and heavy, possibly furniture, possibly a body. You're too sleepy to care, and failing to suppress the joy of mild rebellion. You smile into the pillow. You don't blame them. They've earned it. Historians rarely mention how much laughter lived below stairs. Yes, there was hardship and calloused hands, but also jokes, and songs, and conspiratorial whispers behind the scullery door. Laughter wasn't just survival, it was protest, a way to stay human in a system that asked you to be silent furniture. You drift. You imagine the entire household in their own pockets of sleep, layered above and below you like some great snoring cake of class structure. Your last thought before sleep is not of supper or cousins or candle wax. It's a question. What would happen if they all vanished? If, one day, you woke to an unlit fire, an unbuttoned shirt, and unpoured tea, would you survive? Or would you just lie here, noble and helpless, waiting for someone to find your socks? You don't answer. You're already asleep. You wake up slowly, the way aristocrats are meant to, in mild confusion and silk. The light has changed. The fire has died down. The chamber is just cold enough to be poetic, but not so cold you're tempted to do anything about it. A distant bell rings, possibly morning, possibly a servant tripping over the cat again. Either way, it reminds you time is moving and you're not dressed, which is fine because once again, that's not your job. You lie there for a moment, listening. There it is. Footsteps. Two sets, if your ears are correct, one brisk, one shuffling. Your valet and someone newer. Training day, perhaps? A chance for the junior servant to learn the delicate art of not stepping on your socks or dropping your breeches in the wash basin. You brace yourself for company. The door opens without a knock. Because knocking implies distance, and distance isn't allowed between you and the people who button your shirt. "Good morning, my lord," says your valet in that hushed, linen-folded tone of voice that implies both courtesy and mild exhaustion. He's carrying a coat, 3 brushes, and the kind of expression that says, "I've already dealt with your cousin, and it's not even 8 a.m. You nod. You don't speak. Words are for later. The morning routine begins. He draws the curtains. The light spills in, and your room suddenly reveals all its overnight secrets. A teacup left untouched, a pillow tossed to the floor, a wig stand that somehow rotated 90 degrees to stare directly at you like an accusing poodle. You sit up. Your slippers are waiting, precisely placed where your feet will land. You don't think about this, but he did, hours ago. The new servant, somewhere between 12 and 30 as is standard, carries in the shaving bowl. He places it, with the trembling caution of someone who's been warned about the last lad who chipped your enamel basin. No one ever saw him again. Not because he was punished, he just left. One day. Quietly. Possibly ran off to join a traveling puppet troupe. You like that version. Hot water, cold water, soap, lathered with a badger hairbrush. Your valet shaves you in silence, your chin held aloft like a prized melon. You blink. You try not to sneeze. You do anyway. He wipes your nose before you can react. No one mentions it. That's how mornings go. Next, dressing. You raise your arms. You are dressed. You turn slightly. You are layered. You lift your foot. A sock appears. You yawn. A cravat manifests. It's like being clothed by gentle ghosts. The shirt is crisp. The breeches are snug. The waistcoat is embroidered with tiny birds that you vaguely recall asking for during a wine-fueled debate about symbolism and plumage. You regret it now, but it's too late. The embroidery exists. Therefore, so does the meaning. Historians still disagree on how much time nobles spent being dressed. Some claim it was an hour-long process of fussing and fluffing. Others argue it could be done in 15 minutes flat, especially if the lord in question had recently fallen out of favor and lost 2/3 of his wardrobe to gambling debts. In your case, it's somewhere in between. Enough time to feel important, not enough to miss breakfast. Your valet ties your cravat in the latest style. You hate it, but you say nothing, because the last time you complained, he accidentally handed you mismatched shoes for 3 days. He remembers. You remember. The shoes remember. Once dressed, you're handed a small mirror. You look at yourself. The hair is perfect. The face, symmetrical enough to pass inspection. The expression, somewhere between bored and benevolent, like a cake statue at a royal wedding. You nod. This is as good as it gets. The valet steps back. The junior servant whisks the basin away as if it might explode. You sit for a moment, gathering the courage to face the grand ordeal of being served breakfast in another room. You glance toward the fire, already lit. Your chair is already warm. The chambermaid's handiwork, no doubt. She arrived before dawn, stoked the embers, replaced the ash, dusted the mantel, adjusted the portrait that hangs slightly crooked every time it rains. She did all that before you even remembered how buttons work. And now you rise. Breakfast is waiting, of course. A soft boiled egg, slightly under, as requested, bread with two types of jam, neither gooseberry, someone was listening, and tea so weak it could be arrested for impersonating a beverage. You eat slowly. You think about nothing. You chew, swallow, blink, repeat. You are a machine of refined mastication. Meanwhile, the house continues to spin. Servants are now washing windows. You haven't looked through since last autumn. A maid is sorting dried herbs alphabetically in the pantry, not because anyone asked, but because she likes knowing where the thyme is without having to fight the basil. The butler is discussing floral arrangements with the head gardener using words like understated and hydrangea forward. And the cook is probably mid argument with the chicken supplier again. You, meanwhile, are deciding whether to wear the plum hat or the slightly plummier hat for your morning walk. Life is choices. You finish your tea. You dab your lips. A servant appears and collects the tray. Another lingers with your gloves. You accept them. They're warm, pre-warmed. You don't ask how. You just smile faintly and pretend this happens naturally. Historians have wondered whether such dependency dulled the senses. Did aristocrats become unable to function without assistance? Could they boil water, start fires, write letters unaided? You tried once to start your own collar. It ended in injury and tears. You stand now, fully dressed, fed, shaved, your boots polished, your gloves aligned with your soul. You are ready. For what? For being important, being the person for whom bells ring and fires crackle and biscuits arrive precisely 4 minutes after you think about wanting one. You step into the hallway. Your footman is waiting. Of course he is. The hallway greets you like a freshly waxed stage. Every surface shines. The rug lies flatter than your cousin's anecdotes. And the footman, immaculately uniformed and already standing 3 steps ahead, nods as you approach, the human version of a doorbell with opinions. You nod back. That's all it takes. He knows your destination. You barely have to move your lips anymore. You begin walking, and he leads. Not too fast, not too slow, always slightly ahead, like a sheepdog guiding a particularly spoiled lamb. You're heading outside. For air, for appearances, for the simple thrill of pretending to enjoy brisk walks while secretly hoping someone offers you a sedan chair halfway down the path. Your boots click against the polished floor, echoing just enough to remind the maids you're coming. You hear the rustle of skirts. A door closes somewhere. The invisible wheels of the household pivot quietly around your movement. You reach the vestibule. Another footman is already holding your coat. He assists with the sleeves while pretending not to notice your complete lack of arm coordination. You nod again. You've now nodded more in 5 minutes than most peasants do in a month. Your hat appears, like a rabbit from a well-trained hat magician. You place it atop your head gently, like a delicate truth you're not quite ready to admit. Then, glory of glories, the front door opens, and the world greets you. It smells of damp earth, chimney smoke, and the faint whiff of stable. Somewhere nearby, someone is shouting at a pig, or a cousin. It's hard to tell. The air is brisk. Your cravat tightens slightly in protest. You step outside. The gravel crunches underfoot, perfectly raked. The garden path has been swept of fallen leaves. Someone has deadheaded the roses. possibly out of love, more likely out of spite. The hedges, as usual, are judging you in silence. A stable hand approaches. He's leading your favorite horse, not because you're riding today, but because the appearance of readiness must be maintained. You pat the horse on the flank. It smells of hay and disinterest. You share that in common. You wander. The footman follows, 3 steps behind, just enough to preserve the illusion of solitude. The garden looks magnificent, but you didn't plant it. You didn't weed it. You certainly didn't haul those marble benches down from the quarry like the legend suggests. No, that was Jory the gardener and his son, and probably their son before him. A lineage of dirt-streaked dedication, stretching back generations, each man born with an uncanny ability to detect mildew on sight. Historians still muse about these gardens, not just the flora, but the human machinery behind them. Whole teams of gardeners working in layered shifts, one for the roses, one for the hedges, one specifically assigned to chasing squirrels away from the prized fruit trees with a spoon and a firm shoe. And it shows. The symmetry is divine. The flowers bloom like they've been threatened. The gravel paths are so precise, you suspect someone used tweezers. You continue walking, gloved hands clasped behind your back, posture ramrod straight, though you haven't stood unaided this long since last Christmas. The footman coughs quietly, a prearranged signal. Someone's approaching. It's a neighbor. Not the nosy one, thank the saints, but the one who always talks about drainage and geopolitics in the same sentence. You brace yourself. He doffs his hat. You doff yours. The doffing alone takes longer than most conversations. You chat. You say things like, indeed, and quite, and the roses are ambitious this year. He nods and counters with something about the price of oats and rumors of a new bishop with an unfashionable nose. You try to sound engaged. You mostly succeed. Meanwhile, the footman becomes a statue. He knows better than to blink while his employer is being blandly diplomatic. The conversation ends. No one has learned anything, but reputations have been maintained, and that's the point. As the neighbor walks away, you exhale. That was close. You nearly had to offer him tea. You turn back toward the house. Your boots now carry the faintest smudge of gravel dust. You wonder if someone will polish that out before you even realize it happened. Answer, yes, absolutely. Re-entering the house is like stepping back into your own bloodstream. Warmth, light, the faint scent of lavender and lemon wax. The door closes behind you with a practiced thump. The footman disappears to his next invisible task. You remove your hat. A hand appears to take it. You remove your gloves. Another hand. You might have a third hand waiting just in case you remove your dignity. You proceed to the sitting room. It has been refreshed in your absence. Cushions fluffed. Fire coaxed back to life. Biscuits replaced. You didn't notice anyone doing this. You never do. That's the magic. Historians still bicker over how such choreography was achieved daily in noble households. Some say it was rigorous scheduling. Others claim it was a sixth sense developed by servants, like knowing exactly when a lord was about to sneeze or trip over a rug. One theory suggests there was a secret code system involving discreet coughs and suspiciously placed vases. Whatever the method, it worked. You settle into a chair that has been slightly warmed, but not too much. Another miracle. The dog reappears, flops down beside you, and lets out a sigh that somehow conveys both relaxation and spiritual defeat. You sip your tea. It's back to being too hot. That's fine. You pretend to enjoy the tongue burns. It builds character, and you reflect. Your entire outing, every step, every breeze, every socially mandated exchange, was made possible by people you didn't see. People who walked ahead of you, beside you, behind you. People who lit fires, opened doors, dusted pathways, and smiled at you like you hadn't just insulted their choice of waistcoat 3 days ago. You live your life on a cushion, held aloft by other people's effort, and somehow that cushion fluffs itself each time you shift your weight. You think of the footman, the gardener, the boy with the spoon chasing squirrels, the entire soft spoken engine that makes your comfort possible. And then you ring the bell because you need another biscuit. The biscuit arrives precisely 45 seconds later, which is both impressive and slightly unsettling. You didn't hear anyone walking. You didn't hear the door open. And yet, there it is, a warm biscuit delicately placed on your favorite saucer, accompanied by a spoon you're fairly certain is older than your grandmother's scandal with the Italian fencing instructor. The maid who delivered it is already halfway down the corridor by the time you glance up. A whisper, a breeze, a well trained ghost in sensible shoes. You take a bite, apricot, unexpected, delightful. This simple act, eating a biscuit you didn't make, on a plate you didn't wash, served in a room you didn't clean, is a tiny monument to the invisible empire running your life. And you, its passive emperor, chew with gentle indifference, as if all this appeared by magic, and not by the pre-dawn sweat of someone named Edith, who hasn't had a proper lunch break since the last solar eclipse. You glance around the room. It's perfect, unnaturally so, not a speck of dust, not a curtain out of place. You know this didn't happen spontaneously. Last week, a maid dropped a sugar bowl in here. You didn't witness it, but you did notice that the rug was replaced the next day. Not cleaned, replaced. You wonder if the sugar bowl survived. You wonder if the maid did, and yet, there she was this morning, carrying in your tea, smiling like someone who's forgiven both gravity and you. This, you realize, is the daily miracle of the servant class. They absorb your chaos and reflect it back as order. Historians still puzzle over the emotional labor of servitude in grand homes. There are no ledgers for how many sighs a maid swallowed or how many eye rolls a footman converted into polite silence. One researcher described it as performing serenity in the face of manufactured absurdity. Another simply called it Tuesday. And today is in fact Tuesday. You rise from your chair and wander into the music room. Not to play, of course. You haven't touched the harpsichord since your third lesson ended with a snapped string and a minor existential crisis. But the room is beautiful and empty and faintly humming with recent activity. The candles are lit. The air smells faintly of beeswax and flowers that definitely do not grow on this estate. Someone arranged those. Someone dusted each individual music sheet, even though no one has read them since the Harvest Festival of 1772. You sit on the bench. Carefully. A cushion has been placed to support your lower back, an act of such preemptive empathy that it nearly moves you to tears. Or maybe that's just indigestion from the biscuit. You strike a single key. It pings into the silence like a guilty confession. Somewhere in the house, a servant flinches. You stop. Your talents, it seems, lie elsewhere. You rise. You exit. The room reabsorbs its stillness like a pond swallowing a pebble. Back in the hallway, you pass the main staircase. A maid is halfway up, holding a bundle of linens the size of a small child and balanced like a trained circus performer. She pauses when she sees you. waiting for you to pass. Even though the banister is clearly wide enough for both of you, you nod. She nods. A nodathon. You almost say thank you, but the moment slips by. She's already vanished around the landing, moving like time itself. Relentless, quiet, unpaid. You keep walking. No destination in mind. That's the luxury here. Wandering as performance, as status. Servants don't wander. They move with purpose, with burden, with two buckets and a mangle and possibly a live chicken. You end up in the portrait gallery. It's dim, a little musty, and lined with the blankly disapproving faces of your ancestors. You stare at them. They stare back. You wonder how many of them knew their cook's name, or their valet's, or whether they also pretended not to hear the servants arguing in the scullery after someone burned the pudding. You imagine a future where your portrait hangs here too. What would you be holding? A book you never read? A dog that actually belonged to the gardener? A letter you didn't write but dictated while lying upside down on a chaise? The thought is oddly comforting because the truth is you're not special. You're just next. A new face in the same system, a fresh actor in an old play, and behind the curtains, the same crew of invisible hands keeps the set from collapsing. You turn to leave. A door creaks somewhere behind you. Not an old door, a newly oiled one, creaking out of habit. You smile. You return to your rooms. It's mid-afternoon. The light has shifted again. You lie on your chaise, one leg dramatically flung over the side, the way you imagine French poets do when they're being misunderstood on purpose. You ring the bell, just to see who answers. It's the footman. Again. He looks exactly the same as he did this morning. You suspect he's one of a matched set, alternated every 6 hours to prevent visible fatigue. I believe I'll have a nap, you say. He nods. Very good, my lord. He dims the lamps, draws the curtains, fluffs the pillow with a technique that probably involves ancient geometry. He doesn't speak again, doesn't need to. He leaves as silently as he arrived. You lie there, breathing in the stillness. Wrapped in silence, wrapped in effort. You're not tired, but you nap anyway. Because you can. You wake from your nap feeling only slightly more human than a decorative vase. The room is dusky now, lit not by candles, but by the early blue glow of evening. It's the kind of light that makes everything look softer and slightly haunted. You sit up slowly, like a ghost, remembering it has limbs. Your slippers have been reoriented, facing outward, invitingly. A quiet message. You may rise now, should you choose. You do, because you're curious, because you want tea, because the nap has done absolutely nothing, and your spine still feels like it was designed by a vengeful carpenter. You shuffle to the sitting room. The fire is already crackling. The curtains are drawn, and, miracle of miracles, the tea is waiting. Fresh, warm, steaming politely. A small plate of pastries sits beside it, looking proud of themselves. The napkin is folded into the shape of a swan. You briefly consider unfolding it just to cause mild chaos. But you don't, because someone spent 6 minutes and one finger cramp perfecting that fold. You sip. Chamomile. You didn't ask for it, but someone remembers it calms your nerves, or at least reduces the frequency of you throwing books at pigeons. You sit in silence, chewing on a honey biscuit and thinking about them, not the ancestors, not the portraits, not even your cousin who thinks lace gloves are a political statement. You think about the servants and what they're doing right now, because while you nap and sip and vaguely contemplate putting on a cravat just to feel something, downstairs, the real work begins. Evening is the most intricate shift in a household. The table is being set for dinner, Again, forks aligned like soldiers. Wine decanted, tasted, decanted again because someone spotted a fleck of cork. Candles trimmed, relit, sniffed, judged. Plates warmed, napkins folded in shapes that imply status. A bishop's hat, a swan, a small but meaningful pyramid. The housemaid is polishing the brass stair rods. The scullery girl is peeling vegetables with such speed she could compete professionally. The cook is yelling into a pot, possibly about seasoning, possibly about life. Someone is wrestling with a goose. Someone else is hiding behind a cupboard door, eating a stolen cherry tart and praying not to be discovered by the butler, who has the hearing of a wolf and the tolerance of a hangover. It's a ballet of panic and perfection. And you get to glide into the finale like the world's most pampered ballerina. Historians still debate just how many servants were needed to run a household like this. Some records suggest as few as 10. Others hint at 40, all with precise titles and responsibilities so narrow one person's sole duty might have been to keep track of the guest towels and whether the master preferred them folded or fanned. It sounds absurd. It was absurd, but somehow it worked. Even now, as you wander toward the dining room, the scent of roasted root vegetables guiding your path, you can feel the house bracing itself for performance. You open the door and yes, it's begun. The table sparkles. Candles glow. Crystal gleams. The footman stands to attention, spine straight, gaze soft but focused, like a man mentally balancing 14 things and suppressing the urge to sneeze. You sit. Your chair is pulled gently under you. You don't have to adjust anything. It's already right. First course arrives, soup. Not too hot, not too cold. The Goldilocks of medieval broth. The bowl is placed before you with such precision that you're genuinely unsure whether the footman measured the angle of your spoon placement with a sextant. You sip. It's beetroot and something earthy. Parsnip? Fear. You pretend to enjoy it. Main course follows. Roast something. Possibly duck. Possibly regret. You try not to look too closely at the eyes. And as you chew, you begin to notice just how many people are involved in this one quiet hour. There's the cook, of course, currently fanning herself in the kitchen while daring anyone to mention the burnt onions. The kitchen boy who spent 3 hours plucking feathers. The maid who ironed the tablecloth and re-ironed it because someone dribbled wine at rehearsal. The footman moving in a silent loop, pouring, clearing, presenting, vanishing. The laundress who will later remove gravy stains you haven't even made yet. And all of them are orbiting you, not out of love, not out of admiration, out of duty, profession, survival. It's humbling, in a way, if you let it be. You finish your meal, you dab your lips. The plate vanishes, the dessert appears, a small tart, artfully constructed and probably carrying the soul of a scullery maid who stayed up past midnight crafting it. You take a single bite. It tastes like sugar, cinnamon, and fatigue. You ring the bell. Not because you need anything, just because it's expected. A maid appears. Yes, my lord? You pause. Compliments to the kitchen, you say. Her eyes widen. She nods, curtsies, and leaves. You swear you hear the clatter of dropped spoons a moment later, not out of anger, but shock. You've never said that before. Historians argue about these tiny moments, whether they mattered. Did a single thank you change anything? Was a noble's good mood a blessing, or just a brief break in the storm? You don't know, but the tart did taste better after saying it. You rise. A footman glides forward to pull back your chair, then steps away like a magician exiting stage left. You return to the drawing room. The fire's still going. Someone has rearranged the pillows. You pretend not to notice, but you feel it. The symmetry, the readiness, everything is as it should be. Because a dozen hands moved while yours rested. Because someone was working while you slept. Because you asked, and the world answered. And all you had to do was wake up, get dressed, and ring a bell. The fire crackles as you sink into your chair, full of roast duck, mysterious tart, and just enough existential awareness to make your spine slightly straighter than usual. The dog is back, curled beside your feet like a sentient slipper with opinions. Your brandy appears without request, placed on the side table with such grace that you begin to wonder if the footman studied ballet. You stare into the flames. It's an activity that's both dramatic and entirely non committal, which is ideal. Thinking, but not really. Dreaming, but just at the edge of sleep. You imagine this is what philosophers must feel like right before they say something ridiculous and get quoted for centuries. For behind you, faint sounds, the scrape of plates, the clink of glasses, a polite cough stifled into a sleeve. The dining room is being cleared by invisible hands again. Hands that move with speed and silence, and a kind of intimate memory of your life that should be unsettling, but somehow isn't. You glance around. The drawing room is spotless, which of course it always is. But the real marvel is that you never see it being cleaned. You've never caught someone mid-dusting, never walked in on a half-swept hearth. The servants disappear like snowflakes when the sun rises. The perfection is always already there. You once asked your valet how the piano stays so polished. He just smiled and said, "We have a system, my lord." You suspect that system involves fear, vinegar, and an elaborate chart involving moon phases. Some historians believe that the obsessive cleanliness of noble houses wasn't about hygiene. It was about theater, a constant performance of prosperity, every chair in place, every glass sparkling, every portrait slightly tilted toward your better side. And this theater, it had a full cast. You get up and wander, not aimlessly exactly. You're heading to the library, not to read, please. You go to the library the way some people go to the gym, to be seen going there, to maintain the illusion of intellectual pursuit. Also, the chairs are excellent for napping. As you stroll the corridor, you pass a maid carefully brushing the edges of the wainscoting with what looks like a toothbrush. She doesn't look up. You don't stop. This is the dance. You reach the library. The door is already open, the candles already lit. A small footstool positioned perfectly near your favorite chair, the one with the annoying squeak that someone repaired last week without your knowing or permission. It no longer squeaks, and honestly, you miss it. Books line the walls, hundreds of them, possibly thousands. You haven't read most. You suspect some aren't real, just wooden spines hiding holes in the plaster. But they're impressive. And that's the point. You sit. You pull down a volume at random, a treatise on bee husbandry. You skim the first page. Too many diagrams. You put it back. The footman appears. "Would you like anything, my lord?" You consider saying, "Yes. Tell me how this house functions without collapsing under the weight of my laundry." But instead you say, "Just the usual, thank you." He bows, leaves. He knows what the usual is. You're not sure you do. It varies. And yet it arrives perfectly every time. You suspect a servant somewhere is maintaining a master spreadsheet made of parchment and madness. Historians have argued about this level of anticipation, how servants learn to read the whims of the household. Some suggest it was training, others believe it was generational knowledge passed down like folklore. He blinks twice when he wants tea. She sighs like that before a nap. If he opens that book, cancel dinner. You glance at the clock. Late, but not too late. Just enough time for a final check of the house. Not by you, by them. Downstairs, the final tasks are being completed. Fires are being banked, lamps extinguished, rugs straightened, corners tucked. The chamber pots will soon be discreetly emptied, the windows checked for drafts. The night shift begins, quieter but no less meticulous. The butler has done his last walkthrough. The head housemaid has written her nightly report. A junior maid is hunting for the missing glove you lost 3 days ago and forgot existed. She will find it eventually in a vase and never mention it. And your bed? It has been turned down, the sheets smoothed, the coals refreshed, your robe aired. A glass of water placed just so, next to the pillow. A sprig of lavender on the nightstand, not because you asked for it, but because you once mentioned, 2 years ago, that it helped you sleep. You sip your brandy. It tastes of wood smoke and wealth. You rise, stretch, wander toward your bedchamber. In the corridor, the sconces glow gently. You pass the portrait of your great uncle with the unfortunate chin. He watches you with mild disdain. You ignore him, as always. You enter your room. Everything is ready. You could walk in backward with a blindfold and still land in the exact center of your routine. You remove your shoes, not alone. Your valet appears as if summoned by foot scent. He assists. With the care of someone handling a small animal, you change. Your nightshirt has been folded with origami precision. Your slippers placed on the warmest tile. You step into them with the practiced grace of someone who's never known cold socks. The fire in your room dances low. The shadows flicker. The dog hops into his basket, sighs, and spins 3 times before settling, like he knows his place in the script. You climb into bed. The sheets sigh as you sink into them, and then silence. Sweet, complete, curated silence. But you know, beyond these thick walls, someone is still folding something, carrying something, fixing something you'll never know was broken. That's the deal. You live a life of effortlessness because someone else is always doing the effort. You lie there, eyes open, blanketed in the stillness only a well-run house can provide. The fire flickers its final gestures. A faint breeze nudges the curtains, and even that feels choreographed. You imagine someone backstage, with a fan and a great sense of atmosphere. Sleep should come easily now, and yet your mind, treacherous beast that it is, wanders. You begin to wonder about the people in the attic. Not metaphorically, literally, the attic. The cramped upper floor you never visit. You've never been. You don't even know how many stairs it takes to reach it. That's where the maids sleep, the kitchen girls, the boot boys, the assistant to the under butler's assistant. Whole tiny universes stacked just above your own. No fireplaces up there. No plush slippers. No lavender sprigs beside the bed. Just drafty boards, thin blankets, and the knowledge that if you oversleep, someone else's breakfast will be late. Historians still dispute how many servants actually fit into those upper quarters. Some say 4 to a room. Others claim it was more like 6, rotating between beds, shifts, and consciousness. One diary from 1810 describes sharing a pillow with 2 sisters and a rat named Gerald. You close your eyes and imagine it. The clatter of shoes kicked off in darkness, the soft exchange of gossip and curses, the muffled groans of sore muscles, the quiet rituals of people ending a day you barely registered. Meanwhile, your greatest concern today was whether the soup had too much dill. You shift in bed. The mattress sighs indulgently beneath you. The blanket is warm. The pillow is supportive. Every detail optimized for your ease. But now you're thinking about Martha. You're not supposed to know her name, but you overheard it once, when she dropped the candlestick and the footman hissed her name like a curse and a prayer. Martha. She's the one who carries in your tea each morning, the one with the soft step and the almost missed curtsy. You think she's 16 or 60. It's impossible to tell when someone is always lit by candlelight and stress. You've never spoken to her. Not really. You once said, She said, yes, my lord. It felt like a conversation. You imagine her now, climbing into bed, already thinking about the task tomorrow will demand of her. Boiling water, beating rugs, folding shirts in a way that communicates affection and fear. She will rise before the sun and be in your room before you've finished blinking. You wonder if she ever dreams of something different. You try not to imagine it too clearly. It makes you feel something, which is inconvenient, because feelings don't pair well with silk sheets and second helpings. The dog shifts in his basket. You glance at him. He has his own pillow. You suspect it's nicer than the cook's. You're definitely sure it's warmer than Martha's. And so you begin to notice other things. The way the candle has burned exactly to the wick you prefer. The way your robe hangs, just so on the hook. The faint scent of rose oil, your preferred blend, which hasn't been sold in town for months. Someone must have sourced it, smuggled it, bartered for it, not for themselves, for you, because this is a house of shadows. Not the ghost kind, the labor kind. Invisible hands prop up your comfort like scaffolding. You're not supposed to see them. That's the point. The magic trick isn't just the performance, it's that you believe there was never a trick at all. Historians still debate whether noble households were prisons of comfort, whether the served ever became aware of the surreal machinery that powered their ease. Some claim they were too insulated to see it. Others argue that they knew, but chose not to acknowledge it, because acknowledging it means recognizing the unspoken imbalance that holds everything together. And once you do that, how do you unsee it? You pull the blanket up. You try to stop thinking. You fail. Your mind drifts to the stable boy. What was his name again? Thomas? He once helped you off a horse and apologized for your fall. You landed in the mud and he said, "Terribly sorry, my lord," as if his existence caused gravity. You didn't answer. You were too busy brushing off indignity and horsehair. He sleeps in the hayloft, you think, near the tools, probably beside the mule with the judgmental eyes. He wakes before dawn, mucks the stalls, sweeps the yard, shovels things you don't like to think about, and yet, when he passes you in the garden, he nods with a kind of quiet pride, like he's not holding the smell of 4 animals and your cousin's failed pony in his boots. You envy that sometimes, the usefulness, the reality. You, meanwhile, have spent the day moving from room to room like a gloved jellyfish, trailing requests behind you like tentacles. Sleep still won't come. Your mind is a parade now. The laundress with the cracked hands, the kitchen maid with the secret stash of stolen sugar cubes, the valet who smells faintly of tobacco and always stands an inch closer than comfort allows. They all live within your orbit, and you don't know a thing about them. You wonder what they say when you're not around, what nicknames they've given you, what stories they tell about your habits, your slippers, your love affair with lukewarm tea. You hope they laugh? Because surely, laughter is the only sane response to a system where one person has 14 pairs of gloves and another mends the same stocking for 6 years. You close your eyes. The house creaks. A draft kisses the base of your bed. You wonder if Martha will come in later to check the fire. You hope she doesn't trip. You hope she gets to sleep for more than 4 hours. You hope something you can't quite name. Sleep arrives slowly, not in a rush, but like a servant itself, quiet, practiced, and impossibly polite. And just before you drift fully under, you hear a distant sound, a bucket being set down, a broom being leaned against a wall, someone, somewhere, finally calling it a day. And you sigh, and let them, you awaken the next morning with the distinct feeling that you've slept on top of a secret. Not a dangerous one, just something quiet and inconvenient, like realizing your entire lifestyle depends on a girl named Martha, never oversleeping. The fire is crackling again. The room is warm. Your slippers are angled with their usual silent optimism. The chamber pot has been removed, emptied, and possibly blessed by someone more devout than you. You stretch, slowly, luxuriously, like a cat with inherited property. The valet enters moments later with the kind of timing that suggests either ESP or a peephole. He greets you in the same tone one might use to announce the weather, respectful, unhurried, deeply unsurprised by your existence. Good morning, my lord. You grunt in return, a noble's way of saying, please dress me. And the ritual resumes: shirt, breeches, cravat, waistcoat. Like being built out of fabric and quiet size. Your valet brushes lint from your sleeve with a care usually reserved for newborns or violins. He pauses once to fix a button, muttering something under his breath about the maid with the threadwork of a goat. You almost defend her? Almost. Downstairs, the house is already alive. Boots thump. Water splashes. Silver is polished with righteous fervor. Someone scolding someone else over marmalade. And the phrase, you call that a rind, echoes up the stairwell with surprising passion. You descend, slowly, like a person visiting their own museum. The hall has been swept. Again. The chandelier straightened. Someone even adjusted the angle of the portrait of your aunt in the orangery so it stops glaring at the potted plant. Breakfast is ready, tea steaming, toast crisp. Eggs cooked exactly how you haven't asked for them, but somehow always want. You wonder, again, how they do it. The precision. The psychic understanding of your moods. Historians posit that long-term servants developed something akin to predictive behavioral modeling. Modern words. But really, it was just observation, repetition, and emotional survival. They learned you better than you learned yourself. They had to. The butler enters, clears his throat gently, and announces, the tailor has arrived. Ah, of course, you'd forgotten, but someone else hadn't. The tailor, an old man with pins in his teeth and disdain in his eyes, measures you while making polite noises of judgment. He mutters about your shoulders, tuts about your hips, suggests vaguely that your thighs are ambitious. You don't respond. This is his art. You are his reluctant canvas. The valet hands over your fabric selections. You don't recall choosing them. You don't remember even owning that much velvet. But he knows. He always knows. The fitting ends. You are congratulated on having a body that's still mostly symmetrical. You accept this like a medal. As the tailor departs, the maid clears your breakfast. She does so quietly, efficiently, and with the kind of posture that suggests she once trained in something better than tea service. You wonder what she might have been in another life. An opera singer? A sea captain? A spy? Instead, she folds napkins into triangles and listens to your cousin explain how horseradish is political. You excuse yourself. Walk out to the garden. The air is damp but fresh. Dew sparkles like the estate is showing off. The path has already been raked. Again. The hedges trimmed with almost smug symmetry. The gardener nods at you from a distance. You raise your hand. He raises his. He goes back to trimming roses with the intensity of a man who once lost a duel to a petal. You stroll. A bee buzzes near your ear, politely ignoring you. Somewhere a stable hand sneezes and apologizes to the horse. The world hums. The system purrs. And you? You glide through it. One part noble, one part passenger. You return to the house. The floor has been swept again. You try to catch someone in the act, but no. The broom is back in its place. The dustpan vanished. The magic trick, once again, complete. You pause near the servants' staircase. Narrow, steep, never meant for anyone of your status to climb. You look up. You listen. Voices. Not upset, not hushed. Just real. Laughter, even. And it hits you again. This house contains more than duties. It contains lives. Historians still argue whether nobles truly understood the full humanity of those who served them. Some say no, that the layers of etiquette and hierarchy were too thick. Others believe they did know and simply chose not to see too much, because seeing demands change, and comfort hates change. You stand there for a moment longer, then you return to your chambers. You ring the bell. The valet arrives. His expression, as always, is unreadable, but somehow also vaguely disappointed in your posture. Time to dress for luncheon, you say. He nods, begins selecting things. You think about Martha, about the gardener, about the woman with the good posture and the bad napkin folds, about the lives running alongside yours like a double melody. You wonder, not for the first time, what would happen if they all stopped? If one morning no fire was lit, no robe laid out, no tea poured, would the house collapse? Would you? Probably. But for now, they haven't stopped. They're still ironing, polishing, scrubbing, brushing, stirring, sweeping, listening, mending, carrying, baking, folding, and waiting. And you're still being served, whether you deserve it or not. Luncheon is, as always, a ceremony of minor excess. You arrive precisely 2 minutes late, which is just enough to seem casual, but not enough to be rude. Your cousin is already seated, poking at something that looks like chicken and disappointment. The table has been reset entirely since breakfast. New linens, new cutlery, new glasses, despite the fact that you've used the same water glass since last Wednesday without noticing. You sit. The chair just beneath you, like it too, is employed here. A plate is placed in front of you with the precision of an astronomer plotting a star's trajectory. It's fish, poached, probably fresh, possibly too fresh. You eat anyway. The footman refills your water. You don't remember drinking it. He does. He always does. You begin to talk, vaguely, about nothing. The weather, the state of the roads, the horror of someone's new curtains being striped. Your cousin nods, bored and beautiful in that way. Only people with inheritance and no hobbies can be. A servant clears your plate between sentences, as if he can sense your boredom and wants to help you move on from it. And just when you think the moment might tip into silence, the door creaks. The housekeeper enters. She doesn't speak to you directly, of course. She murmurs something to the butler, who nods, blinks once, and turns to you. My lord, the sweepers have completed the chimneys. There was a minor blockage in the north flue. You nod as if this means anything to you. You pretend to care. You say, very good, in the tone one uses to agree with a doctor or a wine label. The blockage has been removed, the soot cleaned, the danger averted. You didn't lift a finger, but somewhere, someone did. Probably several someones, and at least one of them now has soot in places soot should never be. Historians remain fascinated by the sheer volume of daily disasters quietly prevented in grand households. Chimney fires, broken pipes, infestations, collapsed stairwells, improperly poached eggs. Catastrophes that never reached the noble ear because they were handled neatly, invisibly, by those trained to solve problems before they became stories. And this too is part of your comfort. You live not just in a house of service, but in a house of preemptive miracles. You finish lunch. You dab your lips. You pretend the fish was excellent. It wasn't. But you're not the one who will be cleaning up the untouched vegetables, now fossilized at the edge of your plate. You stand. A maid swoops in behind you and collects your napkin before it can even hit the chair cushion. Another footman appears at the door, ready to escort you to somewhere, anywhere. Your cousin waves you off like a benevolent duchess and returns to her book, which you suspect she's been reading upside down for 20 minutes. You wander, not in circles but in spirals. Each room you pass has changed since morning. The parlor now smells of mint. The drawing room has fresh flowers, lilies today, not roses. The library has been dusted. Again. Even the hallway portraits have shifted slightly, gazing downward as if judging your posture. You pass the linen closet. The door is ajar. Inside, you catch a rare glimpse of the system at rest. Folded towels, stacked like battalions. Bed sheets arranged by season and social emergency. Blankets categorized by who cries during storms and who just likes to be prepared. You don't enter. That world is not for you. You reach the music room. And this time, you play. Just one note. Just one key. It hums into the air, pure and lonely. You remember being taught as a child. The sharpness of the tutor's voice. The way she struck your wrist with a stick for every missed measure. She was terrifying. You adored her. You play another note. It's fine. Someone claps. You spin around. It's Martha, holding a tray, eyes wide, possibly apologizing with her whole body for existing. You smile. You don't say anything. She sets the tray down. Tea, 2 biscuits, a folded napkin shaped like a hedgehog. She curtsies, begins to leave. Do you play? You ask. She freezes. She turns. A beat. No, my lord. You nod. She vanishes. The tray remains. You sit again. You stare at the keys. You don't play. You sip the tea. It's too hot. You let it burn your tongue anyway. Historians have long argued whether these upstairs-downstairs interactions were ever meaningful. Did lords ever see their servants as real people? Did servants ever speak freely without consequence? The records are mixed. Letters, journals, court cases, all painting a world of strange proximity and stranger silences. You think about Martha. You think about the look on her face when you spoke. Not fear. Not exactly. Surprise, maybe, that she'd been acknowledged outside of spills and orders and instructions on sugar. You finish your tea. You don't eat the biscuits. Not out of arrogance, but because you want her to think you saved them for later. You return to your chamber. The bed has been made again, of course. Not that you used it, but the illusion of rest must be maintained. The curtains have been slightly redrawn to let in the late afternoon light. Your boots polished, a single sprig of something herbaceous tucked discreetly near your pillow. You don't know what it is. You like it anyway. You sit, and for the first time all day, you do nothing. Truly nothing. Not the noble nothingness of performance. Just stillness. And in that stillness, you feel the house breathe. You hear a broom sweep a hallway. You hear the clink of teacups being washed. You hear laughter. distant, muffled, fleeting, and you wonder again, what would this place sound like if everyone stopped moving? The sun slips lower, casting golden stripes across the rug like someone painted the floor with butter. You haven't moved in 10 minutes. A new record. Outside your chamber door, footsteps come and go, a familiar rhythm, heels against floorboards, fabric brushing doorways, the occasional soft clatter of tray on tray, all part of the hum of evening. And soon, the final performance of the day will begin. Dinner, not for you this time, for them, the servants. You're not supposed to know when or where it happens. It's not marked on any calendar. There are no bells, no announcements, no silverware rituals. But it happens. Every day, after the final candlestick has been lit, after the last tray has been returned, after your final sigh has been accounted for, they eat, not in dining rooms, not on damask cloth, but in basements, in back rooms, in shadowy corners not meant to be elegant, just enough. They gather around wooden tables rubbed shiny by elbows. They pass bread and stew and whatever's left over from your indulgences. The footmen unbutton their stiff coats. The maids loosen their aprons. The cook might slump into a chair with the dramatic flair of a retired gladiator. And for the first time all day, no one curtsies. No one rings a bell. No one says, "My lord." Just voices, real ones. Laughter sometimes, arguments occasionally, stories always. You've never seen it. But you can imagine it. You do imagine it. And in some strange way, the image makes you feel grounded. Because all day long, you've been orbiting a sun made of other people's work. And here, finally, you're seeing the center of that galaxy. A table, a stew, a sigh. Historians speculate about what these dinners were like. Was there hierarchy below stairs too? Of course. The cook outranked the scullery maid. The butler was king, but there was also camaraderie, a shared reality, a bond forged in the sweat and splinters of keeping everything above them afloat. They whispered secrets over gravy. They swapped gossip and code. They rolled their eyes at your cousin's fashion sense while spooning potatoes onto cracked china. And when the meal ended, someone washed up. Someone banked the kitchen fire. Someone folded their apron with the slow grace of exhaustion. Then they slept in narrow beds, on floors that creaked, beneath beams that sighed with the weight of a world built above them. And you prepare for bed. Your valet helps you out of your coat. You mumble a word of thanks. He nods, neutral as always, but tonight you think you catch a flicker of something behind the eyes. Weariness, maybe, a small ache, a reminder that even the best trained hands can feel the cold in their bones. You sit as he removes your boots. His movements are practiced, exact, but not mechanical. They never are. That's the secret. You think of Martha again, of her quiet curtsy, of the candlelight on her face. You think of the chambermaid who fluffs your pillow each day with fingers cracked from lye soap, of the gardener who speaks to the roses like they're old friends, of the cook who yells with the voice of a woman who's never been ignored. You think of them all. And for the first time, you wonder, what would it take to really see them? Not as hands, or uniforms, or footsteps in the margins, but as lives, parallel, intertwined, hidden. You lie down. The blanket has been warmed. Your nightshirt pressed. A glass of water stands sentinel by the bedside, its surface so still it could be a mirror. The valet dims the candles. "Good night, my lord." You reply softly, "Good night," and you mean it. Not because it's polite, but because you hope he has one. You hope they all do. You close your eyes. The fire sighs. The house settles into its nighttime rhythm, and behind every comfort, every silence, There are footsteps fading down the corridor. A final plate washed. A final door closed. A final light turned out. Now the house is quiet. Still, every hallway darkened, every candle extinguished. Outside, the wind moves through the trees like it's searching for something. Inside, your bed breathes with you. Warm, familiar, feather soft. The last clink of porcelain has faded. The final whisper of fabric against stair has hushed. Somewhere above you, a maid has curled beneath a quilt, finally off her feet. Somewhere below, the kitchen has gone dark, the warmth of the oven lingering like a memory. Even the dog has surrendered, twitching once in his sleep as he chases dream rabbits across the garden paths only he remembers. You lie still, wrapped in linen, wrapped in quiet, wrapped in gratitude. Maybe subtle, unspoken, half formed, but real. The world outside can wait. The questions, the wondering, the absurdity of needing 12 people to button your sleeves. It can all wait. Right now, there's just breath and rest and the distant hum of a life that continues without you for a few hours at least. Let that be enough. Let the fire burn low. Let your eyes stay closed. Let tomorrow unfold slowly, like the corners of a napkin folded just for you. Sleep gently now. You're home. And for once, everything else can take care of itself.